This piece discusses trauma, sexual assault, suicide, and suicidal ideation, and some people might find it disturbing. If you or someone you know is suicidal, please contact your physician, go to your local emergency room, or call the suicide prevention hotline in your country. For the United States, the numbers are as follows. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-TALK or 8255, or message the Crisis Text Line at 741-741. Both programs provide free, confidential support 24/7.
My name is Daman Neighbors, and my pronouns are they, he, meaning use they, them if you possibly can, but if you must gender me, just use he. I was diagnosed officially about 5 years ago. And since then, I've been doing a lot of education and speaking work in the community. As far as my personal story goes about how I finally got to my correct diagnoses, I'm on the autism spectrum. I have a few slight learning disabilities, but I'm also hyperlexic, which means I have incredible verbal ability. In the course of living as a repressed autistic queer person, I developed co occurrings. By the time I was 8, I was suicidal. We couldn't figure out why. I just was not getting along with other kids or understanding them, and I felt like an alien. By the time I was out of high school, I was extremely mentally ill. I had eating and feeding problems. As soon as I got to college, I started drinking. I was sexually assaulted early on in my college career because I was actually not socially with my peers at the same developmental place as them. So I was very naive when I went off to college. So I ended up getting in trouble with the criminal justice system. That precipitated whole new disorders because it's extremely traumatic for a person, any person, to go into the type of private detention center I was held in on several occasions. I developed severe anxiety, depression, generalized anxiety disorder. I got diagnosed with everything, including schizophrenia. It turns out I was just experiencing cycles of autistic enthusiasm and burnout. I love that no matter how suicidal I get at some points, I can always short circuit that because of the autism. I have this really deep sense of wonder about the world, and I don't want to miss anything. And I've just have an insatiable curiosity. I have a pretty broad knowledge of a lot of subjects. I love reading, I love nature. My good emotions are more intense, even though my bad emotions are fairly intense. I like to think it equals out. The thing that makes autism hard for me in general is just the lack of social supports, entitlements, and affordable housing and accommodations in the workplace and things like that. I don't have too many co-occurring disorders that would make me even more marginalized. I'm able to speak, I'm able to control my body movements. So I try to give thanks for the things that do make it easier for me to engage with society while still pretty consciously trying to center the voices and get more people to listen to non-speakers and people with multiple disabilities. So I was in college to be a secondary high school English teacher. And it was during No Child Left Behind when that was really big. And we were learning to integrate all disabled students into the regular classroom with extremely mixed results. And that's when I learned about Asperger's syndrome, as it was called back then. Of course, that's verboten now. But I was so excited during the presentation about Asperger's. I was like, that's me. Both the presenter and my professor shut me down. They're like, no, you can't possibly be autistic. They were very rude about it. I was extremely embarrassed, which put me off for the next 15 years of my life, in which I spiraled downward, worked in restaurants washing dishes, even though I was highly educated, Ended up in the criminal justice system. I was homeless for a period of time. All this compounds your trauma as you go along. Around 2016, I had just come out of my most recent jail sentence, and I hit a real bad place. And I said, well, I need to reassess. I had been put on all kinds of antidepressants and drugs since the age of 14, and my brains were just scrambled from them. So my first thing to try to get a baseline on my real mental health was slowly taking myself off of all the drugs they put me on. My health immediately improved after I stopped taking heavy antidepressants because I wasn't really depressed. I was oppressed. I was not coping well with the kind of discrimination I was experiencing. So, yeah, that's when I started looking at, and once again, I came back to Asperger's syndrome. I was like, this is what's been going on with me. And just around that time, some groundbreaking studies finally came out that described the female autism phenotype and started to define that for people. And in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been an explosion of people like me, late diagnosed females, coming forward. Of course, we've gotten a lot of backlash. You're not really autistic. You don't know anything, very infantilizing. But we're starting to make headway. We're really starting to change how the mainstream is beginning to look at autism and what a wide spectrum it is. One of the most difficult aspects of both the trauma and um, my autism itself is not really being able to communicate with neurotypicals socially in a way that they respond to. That has led to a condition that is not in the DSM yet, but we're starting to use in the neurodivergent community, which is rejection sensitive dysphoria. And it's a trauma response where your brain is pretty much formed through consistent rejection or neglect in your family, in your social groups, and it leads you to become kind of paranoid about friendships, relationships, social interactions. It's very often misdiagnosed as borderline personality disorder, but is not really the same thing. It's just where your brain begins to expect that people are not being honest with you about how they feel with you. You're always expecting that rejection coming, and it's very hard to control sometimes. So that's what I struggle with. I would take away the social anxiety that I have about whether people are really like me or not, or whether they're just putting up with me. When's the other shoe going to drop? When are they going to start to pull away? And you start maniacally looking for the little signs that that's going to happen. And unfortunately, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You become so paranoid and people get insulted by you not trusting them that they pull away. So it does end up happening. I think that's something most autistic people and neurodivergent people deal with across the board almost. Communication is always a two-way street, and we're always expected to make up all of that distance. It's all our responsibility because the way the story is told by the neurotypical majority is that no matter however we're different, it's wrong. I've learned that I was raised in a culture that is essentially abusive to autistic people, in that the expectations that are put on us are ridiculous, but it's particularly oppressive when you can only handle a certain amount of hours a week. I've learned not to hate myself for not being able to do grind culture like we are encouraged to do. I would say just sit back and listen for a minute. Don't try to fight with us about everything that we say. I wish people would realize that even though I don't appear on the surface to have a lot of barriers to functioning, I'm able bodied for the most part and intelligent, but that's not really what employers and society is looking at as far as success goes. Don't go around judging somebody's capabilities by how they present on the surface. I actually have a number of very difficult aspects. I have severe ADHD and I can barely count. I can't do basic arithmetic. I usually have to mask to a certain extent, and forcing a brain to organize things that is not good at organizing things is like doing a hard math test all day long. So the exhaustion level is real and the burnout is real. And I can do a job well for about 3 to 6 months, but if I don't get more downtime, I will burn out and lose it. When you do seem capable and intelligent, people have a lot more expectations they put on you. And it's hard to explain, no, I'm disabled in this specific way, where it's hard to me to prove how disabled I am, you know? And that's very difficult because I will never get disability insurance. I just wouldn't know how to prove how my day-to-day life is difficult. So be gentle with us and be understanding and ask us more about how much engagement we can offer, in the workplace or socially, whatever it is. I see all this material by neurotypicals about hyperlexia, and they're pathologizing it. They're saying this is a disorder, a condition, a syndrome. And I'm like, no, it's just something that some people are good at. It's an ability. I feel like it's more the medical establishment is diagnosing their toddlers and then just scaring the shit out of them, saying your child will never do this and never do this. And, if I had a nickel for every time a kid eventually did what the parent was told that they would never do, I'd have bank. It's ridiculous how much we're able to, and I don't like using the word overcome. We always had that potential there. We didn't overcome anything. They just underestimated us from the get-go. So when I engage with parents, it's like, you couldn't have known any better. When you search for autism stuff, all the wrong stuff comes up in the Google search. You're not going to be directed to people with autism who are talking about their experiences, or autistic professionals, of which there are an increasing number of, especially in, mental health services and social services, which I think is an excellent thing. Every time I went into a new mental health professional, I've been to over 50 in my life, I would suggest maybe I'm on the spectrum. And every last one of them would shoot it down and give me a completely bogus diagnosis, some very damaging medications that would make me even more mentally ill. It's really hard to get out of that cycle, especially when the medical establishment is a big part of the problem. Oh, Lord, when we come to the doctor and we have actually gone through the process of making an appointment, filling out paperwork, getting ourselves there, it means something's wrong. The problem is we don't always know how to express pain or concern to neurotypical people. Do not dismiss us, first of all, as hypochondriacs. We're not making it up, even if we have trouble describing what it is. Don't dismiss our research. Most of us are worried about this 24/7, so we've gone a little deeper than WebMD or whatever. Listen to the content of what we're saying and not how we're saying it. And for the love of God, stop trying to figure out if we're drug seeking or not. That's the most distressing thing to me. Is I had some rare nerve tumors in my hand that are known for being extremely exquisitely painful. It took me 5 years to get anyone to believe that I had these extremely painful tumors in my hand. Took 3 surgeries to get them all out. And I was just gaslighted the whole way. I got kicked out of various doctors' offices because they thought I was drug seeking. And I was not. I was in horrible pain. I think one of the biggest causes of death and poor quality of life in our community is medical neglect. Now, that doesn't mean we're neglecting to get ourselves to the doctor. It means they neglect us once we're there. Consistently, that's one of the worst problems I see in the community. Is I went to this doctor, they wouldn't listen to me. I am obviously having this kind of condition. Also, autistic people have very weird presentations of different illnesses and disorders. So keep an open mind when you're examining someone with neurodivergencies. Our bodies are different too. Just please treat us with some respect. It's very important. It's why we get so afraid of even engaging with the medical profession. After my diagnosis, there was not a good support group in my area for people like me, particularly females on the spectrum. It was just these gatherings of guys who unfortunately hadn't really been taught how to engage respectfully with women in cases. And because females on the spectrum are so vulnerable to assault, I felt like genderqueer and female people needed a group where we could talk about some of those things. So I formed a group. Since then, we just include all genders and presentations, as long as everyone stays respectful. It's called the Southern Neurodiversity Alliance. We have a Zoom support group every Friday. I started a blog to try to figure out what my voice was. And that's been extremely good as far as getting my ideas crystallized, coming up with new ideas, and building on what neurodivergent theorists have come up with before me. Mostly, I just do different gigs around the country. I help train special education teachers and clinicians. I speak at conferences specifically about gender expression and dating and sexuality on the spectrum. And because we are developmentally disabled, there's a lot of discomfort among clinicians and neurotypicals in discussing those things. But we definitely need better sex education for all of us, more accepting, positive sex education for us. But that also teaches us how to put down boundaries, especially as neurodivergent people who have been, in many cases, trained to be compliant. This is a burgeoning civil rights movement. It's had some fits and starts during the 60s and 70s civil rights movements, but people tend to think of our issues as medical issues when we really feel like it's social issues. That doesn't mean that people's disabilities aren't inherently disabling and it's all social, but it's a combination of those things, social factors, and just having to deal with the conditions themselves. It's important for every movement to acknowledge the civil rights of disabled people because there is no group on earth that is immune from disablement. It's a great unifier across ages and races and backgrounds and class and everything. It's a very underappreciated part of the civil rights work that needs to be done in this country.